Local Ad is an absolute joy, and honestly, I got a little bit emotional. This is the 5th episode of the 4th season of The Office. This is directed by Jason Reitman, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And it starts off with establishing the main narrative that Dunder Mifflin is making its very first commercial, and Jim points out that this is useful because whenever he mentions he works at Dunder Mifflin, nobody has ever heard of them and they just think they make mufflers or muffins or mittens. And I have to say, I love the name. I'd love to know how they came up with the name. I know it's the surnames of the founders, but I wonder why they chose those names specifically. I did do a quick Google. I didn't find anything, but I didn't look for too long. If anybody knows why they specifically decided to call it Dunder Mifflin or made the founders Dunder and Mifflin, I'd be very keen to know. And Dwight is playing Second Life, which I had completely forgotten about, and we'll come back to this in a little bit. We then get to see the National Branches ad, and Michael's not very happy about it. It's not the kind of thing that he envisioned for the Scranton branch, and again, we'll come back to that. Andy then asks Dwight for advice on kissing Angela, and obviously Dwight is very uncomfortable about this, and it gives us a really great moment in a little bit. Rainn, and I have to say, I was very curious about how they'd keep Rainn in every episode, or I assume he's going to be in every episode going forward. I have no idea, but with Jim, when Jim moved, it made sense that we almost had like a second office to play with. Whereas with Rainn, obviously we're not just going to be looking in Ryan's office all day, every day, so I wasn't really sure how they'd bring Rainn into it regularly. And with this episode, he's brought into it because Eddie Murphy phones him. Not really. He gets a call from Eddie Murphy. His assistant tells him, or receptionist, I'm not sure who she is, but she tells him that Eddie Murphy is on the phone, and it's actually Michael doing impression of Donkey from Shrek, which I have to say was great. I really liked it. And I loved Michael's response as well when Rainn told him to not call him about small problems, and Michael said, yeah, well, you don't like it when I call about big problems either, or something to that effect. I didn't write it down, but I rather enjoyed it. It's a good point. And Michael explains to Rainn he wants to do the ad in-house. He's not happy with the way the advertising company are doing it. He wants to do it his way and the way he thinks that it should be done. And we'll come back to that in a second. Jim has then worked on his own avatar for Second Life, and Pam is keen to do hers as well. We then get to hear Daryl playing some music and some of the others singing a theme song for Dunder Mifflin, or a jingle. And I have to say, while it's a little bit too busy, I don't think it's quite right for an advertising jingle. Not that I know anything about it. I'm not an expert at all, but just my opinion. It's not quite as catchy as I think it should have been. I did enjoy it. I did really like it. It was very, very well done. Phyllis then comes back from trying to find a celebrity. She's really upset. She kind of sounds quite a bit like sadness, which I rather loved. And Pam then stays late to work on her own stuff. And then we have the moment between Andy and Dwight. And it was honestly kind of creepy, but very enjoyable, because Andy had managed to make some progress with his physical relationship with Angela. And she said, well, she called him D. She said, oh, D, as in D for Andy. And that's obviously what Andy thinks. But we know that she calls Dwight D. And Dwight's very excited about this. And to Andy, it seems like Dwight's celebrating Andy's success. But obviously Dwight in that moment is realising Angela is still thinking about him. And I found it to be a very funny scene. It worked really, really well. And then we cut to, we're near the end now, 10 days later. And it turns out they didn't like Michael's idea. So they're going with their original idea. And we get to see a little bit of it. And yeah, it was fine. It works well. But then Jim, they're in a pub, and Jim hands the CD over, or the disc, and we get to see Michael's version of the ad. And I got really, really emotional. And it's really beautiful. It's very well done. Basically, I don't want to I know I said spoilers. I don't want to give away too much, though, because it really is something that's worth watching. But basically, we see pieces of paper being used in different ways, delivering different messages to different people. And of course, the employees are all involved in this. And it's just so emotional and so beautiful. And I really started to well up because it's just absolutely gorgeous. And to think I hated the first season of The The Office. I've got a lump in my throat. I never thought I'd get to the point where I have such a strong emotional connection with the characters. It is one of those things where it feels like family, and it's quite common when you watch sitcoms to feel like you're part of that family or that friend group or whatever it is. And I now do have an emotional attachment to the characters. Honestly, it happened quite quickly with season 2, but season 1 was a bit of a mess. But after that, I just kind of fell in love with the show really, really quickly. And watching this is just, it's so beautiful. And yeah, maybe it's a little bit long for an ad. I don't know how long it was actually, but it felt like it was quite long. And I feel like it could, that being said, it could work as an ad. But the concept I thought was beautiful. The execution was gorgeous. We get to see Pam's logo at the end. And I don't necessarily think Pam should be creating the logo, which is what she did, because obviously it's up to the company to create the logo. But like the people at the very top to decide what the company's logo should look like, unless it's an existing logo and she just did some animated effects on it. But even then, I don't think that Pam has the right to do that, or the authority. That's probably a better word. I don't think she has the authority to do that. But it did seem like when she said earlier on in the episode she could create a logo, so it did sound like she was creating the logo. And yeah, that's definitely not something she should be doing. Brand awareness is really important. Logo recognition is really important. I don't think it's down to Pam to be creating that. But nevertheless, it was really nice to see. And it was a really beautiful moment. And everybody gathered together watching it. And everybody looking at each other when they were all on the screen. And it was just one big happy family. And I rather enjoyed it. Local ad, it's a delightful episode. And honestly, a really beautiful episode of The Office.